My name is Steve Hale. Apologize for my voice. I'm a partnership specialist for the 2020 census. A little bit of background about me. I grew up in western Kansas. St. Francis, Kansas is in the very northwest corner of the state. Population of about 1,200, I believe. My dad was the publisher editor of the St. Francis Herald and the Bird City Times. So back in those days when I grew up, you ever heard of a letterpress? And lead ink and linotypes? That's what I grew up as in journalism. So I went to K-State, and after that I worked for newspapers in McPherson, Cimarron, Ark City, Nevada, Missouri. I went and started a newspaper in Gardner, Kansas. It was a short-lived episode. I was there. My wife and I had that newspaper in business for 1 year. We had one employee, and he made more than us. So we moved on. But I stayed in newspapers for a while and then got into marketing and public relations and marketing, and journalism career is a real good segue into that area, to that arena. I worked for an agency that did a lot of work for the KDHE and the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. We did a Kansas Don't Spoil It recycling program, and maybe you've seen the Click It or Ticket that's around today. We were the first agency that started that up, and so I've been able to travel Kansas a lot. In my capacity with the Census Bureau, traveling the state, teaching about the census, advocating for everybody to take part in the census. And we're going to go over why it's so important. And it's really good to see these young faces here today. We have got really great partners. I need to say first for the League of Women Voters, they've got a really good website full of good information, and they advocate for the census. I just put this off of their homepage. We are committed to a fair and accurate 2020 census because if our communities are not fully counted, opportunities for investment, health, public safety, and representation will be lost. That's exactly right. And then we go to the library. This week, I'm excited. I'm presenting on Thursday to the Kansas Library Association. And they too are engaged in the census. We are committed to helping our communities achieve a complete count because libraries serve everyone, and we believe everyone counts. And those cute little kids from the Parsons Public Library. Anybody? I'm curious to know where everybody's from, but that's a whole other deal. I'm all about the state of Kansas. So does everybody know why we do the census? We're required to. The Constitution requires us to take part in the census. First one was in 1790, and Thomas Jefferson was the man who oversaw it. And so ever since that time, we have used the census count to determine who is going to serve in the House of Representatives and the number. So we are required to take account, we as a Census Bureau, to take account of the population of this country. We turn those results over to the president. Really, I apologize for my voice. NASCAR weekend, yeah, serious. Turn those accounts over to the president, who in turn, in April of 2021, will return those numbers over to the House of Representatives, and they will disseminate that information, those counts, back out to the states, who will then do their apportionment lines for the House of Representatives and per their own legislatures. So we are to count every person living in this country. Every person living in this country. You don't see the word citizen up there. We're counting everyone. So we are to count, if you count everyone who is living here as of April 1st, 2020, and that's our job. This census, I'm guessing that maybe a lot of people in this room haven't ever done a census before or filled out a form before, because we're maybe 10 years ago, you would have been less, maybe 10, in that range. Wow. Okay, so in the past, it's been a paper pencil process where a household will receive an invitation or receive its census form in the mail. It's filled out, sent back, and if nobody fills it out, after a while, someone will eventually come and knock on the door. This time around, there's a big push to drive census responses online. So 95% of those households in this country will receive an invitation to take part in the census. And it will come in the form of an envelope. People have asked me what that envelope looks like, so they'll be able to identify it. Well, they're kind of keeping that secret because they don't want anybody to try to counterfeit it or get an idea what it's like. So there will be a form, and inside that form will be a code. You will be able to go online on your phone or a tablet and fill out the census. That's a totally unique process from years past. It's done for a lot of reasons. One are efficiencies and being able to monitor how the count's going in real time. Um, but it's also a cost saving. Does anybody have any idea or seen what the U.S. government's the budget is for the census this year? All right. Every time I go to a small town and I throw out this number, they almost get mad. So don't get mad. But $16 billion. $16 billion on the census. And they say if not for this online and the technology that's involved in this entire process, it would be $5 to $6 billion more. So there's some cost efficiencies with this. When someone fills out their census form, when they go online to do it, there will be 13 languages, and it's the same if you go on the phone. There'll be 13 languages that can be handled that way. You can ultimately respond to the census by mail. If you don't respond to the online and the repeated mailings that you get, you will be sent a questionnaire. A household will be sent a questionnaire, and you can fill it out that way. But you do not have an opportunity to say, I want to do mine by paper. You just have to wait till the process and one comes to you. I might mention this. Hey, thank you so much. See, the League of Women Voters are even nice. Nice people. It mentions that 5% are dropped off, and I don't know. When I grew up in St. Francis, I lived in town, and we didn't have mail delivery in town. Everybody went to the post office to get their mail, so post office box. The census questionnaires are not delivered to P.O. boxes. In those situations, the census taker, enumerator, will literally go to houses and put a questionnaire, an invitation or questionnaire, and/or questionnaire in the door for them to respond. So across Kansas, that's kind of a big thing because a lot of those towns have P.O. boxes. And even my mom and dad, who live on the other end of Wakarusa, in I would say an apartment for seniors, I'm not sure. I talked to them today about how they get their mail, and their mail is delivered to an address, but then it's got an apartment number, so it's bulk delivered to a place, and I'm not sure really if they're going to be counted as a group quarters, we'll talk about, or I'm not sure how that would work. They do have a mail address and not a P.O. box, but we'll see. So this is a general census timeline. Regional census centers opened last year. The census has divided the country into 6 different regions. There used to be 12, and now there's 6. There used to be a regional office in Kansas City, and we are part of the Denver region. And this Denver region includes the Dakotas and Montana and Wyoming and Colorado and Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and Wyoming and New Mexico. There's 12 states in that region. And a regional census office that is opened specifically for the census opened in Dallas in 2018. That census center, when I first started in February, I've been at this job a long time. I started in February. I went for training in Dallas, and they had less than 100 people in this office. I heard last week they had up to 500 and growing. So it's going to build up for the census, and then when the census is over, just like my job, it'll all go away. That census is done, taken care of, it'll go away. Then I either retire or find something else to do. The address canvassing is an aspect of this that just did complete. They just announced today that it was a completed process. This is where the Census Bureau will go out and send people out to verify some households and some addresses. Excuse me. In the past, when they because of cooperation with the cities, working with the post office, with satellite imaging and geocoding, they have a pretty good idea where the households are. But in new construction areas, or sometimes there's places where there's a lot of transiency, they will go around and do household checks, visually confirm that there's people living in a certain address. And so that process just did complete. We're going to talk a little bit about group quarters, but group quarters involves college dorms, Army barracks, senior living centers, military bases, RV parks where people live permanently, marinas where people live permanently. That process, they're not going to start the count in January of 2020, but they will start the research and working with people to see how best to proceed with that count. We'll get more into that a little bit later. The mailers go out March 9th. There'll be a staggered mailing. April 1st is the key day. No April Fool's jokes, please. But where you live, as of April 1st, that's where you're to be counted. That's where you're to be counted. Oh, let me back up a part, sorry. So then in May, if you do not respond to the census first invite, You'll get another mailer, and if you don't respond to that, you'll probably get another mailer with a questionnaire, an actual questionnaire, and if you still don't respond, then a census taker is going to come around and knock on your door. They'll come to you to get your information. This is not any different from any previous census. That's just how the process is going to work. That's the non-response follow-up. Hopefully by the end of August it's complete. The counts are delivered to President Trump, and then the counts go to the states. These are the 10 questions that are on the questionnaire. Name, phone, age, sex, race, Hispanic origin. If you are Hispanic, it'll ask for more detail about your origin. Relationship to the householder, whether you own or rent, number of the people in the household, usual place of residence. When I gave this presentation 2 months ago, there was an 11th question on there, a citizenship question. Not there anymore. The Supreme Court said it's not supposed to be on there. We can have a long discussion about that. I'd rather not, but we could. And don't think that we don't have remnants of that controversy that we're dealing with today, but that question, the citizenship question, is not on the questionnaire. A lot of people ask me why the phone number is there, and I've been told that's for quality control purposes. If there's something that's unclear about a census form that's been submitted, they can call back and just some follow-up that's done with that number. We are really having to emphasize this point a lot, partly because of that citizenship question, but we want to make sure that people understand that your information is kept confidential. We are required, as part of the Census Bureau, to keep your personal data confidential for 72 years. 72 years. So in 2022, the information that's going to be released will be from 1950. That's how long they keep that information confidential. So I'm sworn to take an oath. I $250,000 fine or 5 years in jail if I release anybody's personal data, not like I'd ever see it. But we really want to emphasize that this information is kept confidential and secure. There's, I believe everything that the government tells me, and they tell me that it's really secure. So really, really secure. One guy I was trying to go, like, how do I explain that? And he goes, well, when you apply for a credit card, or a bank account or whatever, that information is encrypted like 9 times. Well, the Census Bureau does it like 15 times. So, okay, that makes it much safer. I'm in on that. The other aspect about this that I had a student resource officer. Well, I was sitting in a room of people that they were contesting how confidential the records information would be and that. And the resource officer goes, she says, I don't know why you're all worried. Not that the security is important, but it's not like you're putting your social security number down there or your bank account number or anything like that. It's personal information that's, yes, you want it to be safe and secure, but it's not like someone's going to take that information and hack into your bank account with it. So that toned everybody down a little bit, and I've been using that line ever since. In the big picture, we've talked about apportionment in the House of Representatives. So this is what happened in 2010. There are 435 seats in the U.S. House of Representatives, and that number stays the same, 435 seats. So as states grow and gain or lose in population, so changes the representation in the House of Representatives. So the states that you see there in blue all gained representation in the House of Representatives in 2010. And the states that you see in yellow all lost. They all lost representation. Kansas stayed the same. I have seen projected maps for what's likely to happen this year, what they project this year. Texas, which gained 4 seats in 2010, also has what's considered one of the most hard-to-count populations along that southern U.S.-Mexico border. They're still expected to gain as many as 3 seats this time. So there's a lot of states that are actually putting budget monies towards promoting the census. Minnesota is one of those states on the cusp. And last time they were expected to lose, and they worked hard to inform people about the census, and they didn't lose. And they're expected to lose again, and they're working just as hard this time as they did last time. So there's a lot at stake at this. In Kansas, while we're not expected to lose any, those districts that you see, those are our congressional districts that you see there on the left. Kansas 1st District is Roger Marshall, and Kansas 4th District is Ron Estes, 2, Steve Watkins, that's what Lawrence is in. and 3 is Sharice Davids. So while Kansas is not expected to gain or lose, that obviously could change, but they're not expected to, that doesn't mean that those boundaries don't change. The Census Bureau has nothing to do with the lining up of those boundaries. That's not the Census Bureau's jobs, that's your elected officials' jobs. So if the count shows that there's a population shift in and out of any one of those districts, those boundaries could change, as they could for the middle, which is the state senate districts, or to the right, which is the state House of Representatives districts. Those lines could all change. I can also tell you that sometimes it takes this state a while to get its act together. We were the last state in the nation after the 2010 census to get our lines drawn. And they couldn't figure it out in Topeka, so a federal judge helped them make their decisions. That's Kansas. Okay, the big picture. And this is why when I go around and speak to communities across this fine state, I'm sitting down with county commissioners, city council members, city managers. They understand that this state gets $6 billion, more than $6 billion annually from the federal government based on decennial counts. That's for the top 55 programs. There's actually more than that. So I don't know what the total number would be, but it's well above $6 billion. These are the top 5 programs that received funding from the feds based on the decennial counts. One is medical assistance programs, that's Medicaid. Federal direct student loans, there you go. Supplemental nutrition programs, or SNAP. Medicare Part B, highway planning and construction. But look at this next tier. These programs are also impacted by the census counts. We're talking Pell Grant programs, Section 8 housing vouchers, school lunch programs, special ed grants, Head Start, school breakfast programs, business and industry loans, adoption assistance, public housing capital fund, career and tech education grants. What we're talking about here is a quality of life. We are talking about quality of life issues, and that's why you're going to find communities that are working real hard to make sure that their communities are accurately counted, because these dollars really work their way down to the local level. And I'm guessing that any one of you in this room, we could point to one of these programs out there that impacts you personally. Just a guess. And here's the deal. It lasts for 10 years. These numbers are in place for 10 years. I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years. Look at what 10 years ago you were 10, next time you'll be 30, or around there. I don't know. Somebody said, what's the next census going to look like? And I said, I don't know. I said, hell, you can walk into an Amazon store and walk out with goods and it's paid for. Maybe we'll do the census a whole lot different next time around. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. 10 years from now, we're going to be still living with these dollars, these counts. So, yeah, Kansas, isn't that pretty? That's from the McPherson, Kansas website. All right, so this is some of the things that we're dealing with right now. I talked to you a little bit about the efficiencies of being online. Well, there's some downsides to it as well. Not everybody has a computer. Not everybody's comfortable with using a computer. My mom and dad are 89 and 87 or thereabouts, and they won't get on a computer. I can guarantee you. They will wait till they get that questionnaire to do it. There's a distrust out there in the government. We talk about the distrust in government, and it's at a higher level than even I considered when I first started this process. I'm going to talk about Garden City quite a bit. I spoke at a Chamber of Commerce event at Garden City, and the superintendent of schools, Steve Carlin is his name, fine gentleman. He comes up to me and he goes, we're all in. We are going to help any way we can to get a complete and accurate count because we know what it means. And also Garden City, the entire area out there, they believe that they were undercounted in 2010, and they appealed their rulings twice to no avail. They appealed it. They're still pretty chapped about what happened. But the superintendent of schools came up to me and he goes, we have got parents who are so afraid putting their name on another piece of paper that they're not signing their own kids up for free and reduced lunches. And I thought that was going to be unique. Well, the Dodge City superintendent told us the same thing. The Concordia, Kansas superintendent told us the same thing. It goes beyond distrust. There's a fear out there. And so we're working real hard as part of this whole process. One of the reasons I'm here tonight is to help get information about the census so everybody stands, that information is kept confidential It's not released to the federal government. It's not released to IRS. It's not released to Homeland Security or ICE or anybody. That information stays with the Census Bureau. I'm going to go. Here's another just good thought. I don't know why that made me think of this. So I had this really cool presentation at the Eisenhower Public Library, and that wasn't me that was the cool part of it. They did an Eisenhower family through the years, and Dwight D. Eisenhower's great-great-grandfather signed the first census in 1790. His name's on it. So they did this really awesome presentation about Eisenhower family through the years through the census. So they had a signature from the Eisenhower family, and then they did a little piece on the era. Then they had the next group of the Eisenhower. They went through the years, and then we had to follow that. It was just a really mesmerizing, and then here we come up with the boring census stuff, but that presentation was awesome. This lady came up to me afterwards, and she goes, I am so excited that now that you're doing this all online, you know how hard it was to read those signatures on there? We're no longer going to have to be reading those signatures like that because it's going to be all like that. And I said, 72 years from now, when you go and check those files, you will be able to read it. So from 70, and when you're around in 72 years, you will have the benefit of seeing no signatures. You all didn't think that was that funny, I can tell. Oh well. Well, anyway, I got off track, and that's my fault. So you can kind of see what we're working with here. We have identified hard-to-count areas. We already know that the two hardest demographics to count traditionally are children under age 5 and persons over age 65. And you'll see these other different groups down there. At the bottom is college students. You're in a hard-to-count area, Lawrence. Children under 5, there's a variety of reasons. Some people just don't put down their kids in their house. That tends to be, that happens more in lower-income neighborhoods and migrant communities. Kids get moved around, and maybe one parent doesn't know if they're in their household, and maybe they're in another time. But kids fall through the cracks, and we're working real hard with Head Start and other groups, schools, to try to make sure we get them counted. Persons over age 65 also have some unique living arrangements. Sometimes they're just tired of messing with Uncle Sam, or for whatever reason, they've got a different attitude. But over age 65 are hard to count. Approximately 10% of Kansas' current population lives in hard-to-count neighborhoods. That's pretty dramatic. Well, let's talk a little bit about group quarters. Group quarters, as I mentioned before, are places where you live or stay, where somebody else manages the place and you don't manage it. This would be resident halls, group homes, prisons, nursing homes, residential treatments. Homeless populations are considered in group quarters. And the way this we will have a totally different operations team, group quarters operations, that's all they will do is count group quarters. So I mentioned that they start in January of 2020. They know in KU where the dorms are, or any community where the senior living centers or whatever, and they will go and interact and talk with the managers of those facilities to determine how the best way to count the people that are living in those specific quarters. The ideal is for everyone in those quarters to be able to have a questionnaire. That's the ideal. It's not always practical. I can guarantee you that here at KU, when they go to a dorm and they say, well, how are we going to count the kids in this facility, they're going to get standard records and say, these are the kids, and these are the names, and this is the demographics that we have in this, but they're not going to go door to door and hand out questionnaires hoping you guys give your information back. We just know it. We know that we're not going to go into a jail and go cell to cell and get that. We're going to get that information from the warden or the sheriff or whatever. So if you live in group quarters, you won't get a letter in the mail. You won't be able to respond via the internet. You will have the same confidentiality and privacy rights as everyone else. Like I said, preferably, ideally, you complete your own questionnaire, but might be counted in administrative records. College towns will have the first wave of non-response people that will go out knocking on the door, and you maybe can understand why. Because if this census happens in April 1st, what time are your finals, and when time do you all start going home? The reason that's important, because you are to be counted in Lawrence, wherever you live. Your household, wherever you're from, on their instructions on that questionnaire, it's going to say, if anyone in this household is away at college or away at the military, they are not to be counted in this household. They're not to be counted. So you are to be counted. You live here 9 months of the year. You're here on April 1st. You're to be counted in Lawrence. Now, that's significant in Lawrence, but let's take it another step. Let's go to Fort Scott, Kansas, or Iola, Kansas, or Colby, Kansas, or Chanute, or Parsons, or Coffeyville, or Independence, or Pratt, or Colby, or Dodge City, where they have community colleges that maybe have 400 or 500 kids from out of state or out of town. And then you have a population of maybe 5,000 or 4,000. There's a Highland Community College has 800 people in town and 3,000 people in the community college. Where do they want those kids counted? They want them counted in their town. So that they're going to be coming around and making sure that they do those counts before those kids go home. Just how it's going to work. I'm going to show you this map here. There are some tools, and this is pretty cool. This is like a big old Google map where you can zoom in on any census tract in the country and determine the demographics and if they're going to be hard to count or not. So you can see the darker the area is, the harder to count that community is estimated to be, predicted to be, and I'll show you some examples of that. Now this one happens to be Lawrence. That's the Lawrence census tract, and this shows you, you can click on any tract of Lawrence and it'll give you demographic information like you see there on the right. But why would you think that middle area there in Lawrence might be the hardest to count? Jayhawks. Jayhawks. They either don't want to be counted or they can't count. What is it? You guys are hard to get a rise out of. The similar map is similar in Manhattan. That campus there is considered a hard to count community. What I did is you can see that circles Kansas, and you can see where some of our darker areas, you can see the Manhattan area is not a whole lot different. But if we zoom in on a tract, I did some example. This is Wyandotte County, and I did tract 410. And what you see there on that tract is the low response score. That is not a very good score, 31.1. What that means is they expect that 31% of the population in that particular tract will not self-respond to the census. That's based on several things. That's based on how well they responded in 2010, and it's based on ongoing surveys about the demographics that the Census Bureau does all the time, and it's based on the dynamics of the community that they know, based on persons living below poverty level, the racial backdrop of it. But you'll look at this. This is this particular area in Kansas City, Kansas, is low income. A lot of kids, a staggering number of kids living below poverty, primarily black, some Hispanic. Now I'm going to come down to this area down below, and I just want you to see how in a span of as a crow flies, this probably be 1.5 miles. And by the way, these I just copied and pasted, so they're not proportioned. But so here's a similar tract that's just lower, and it's still low income. But look at the dynamic. It went from it went to 68% Hispanic. So what this tool does, it allows a community and the leaders of that community to know, not that they don't already, but this will give them some value information when they're trying to determine what messaging, who are the trusted voices. I can tell you that in Wyandotte County, we're relying a lot on the faith-based community to help us get our messages out, ministerial alliances, and that's in large part because they have the breakdown of the different dynamics. Now here's Sedgwick County. I'm picking low. I'm picking I don't want to say sexy. I'm taking the hard to count areas to give you a little bit. So this is a lower income area in Wichita, and they again have a low response score. A good response score would probably be in the 15 to 20 would be excellent. 20 to 25 is okay, but anything above 25 is considered something that we really need to pay attention to. You can see that the median age has gone up, and here we've got more of a diverse community, 69% black and 13% Hispanic. If we go out to liberal, here's a tract that's it's got a pretty good score, but here it's 81% Hispanic in liberal Kansas in this particular tract. And one thing that does amaze me about this is we've been looking at these income tracts. We've been seeing 12, 18,000, 39,000 average household income out in that particular tract. That's kind of unique. Here's Goodland, Kansas. This is my home country. Population about 5,000 on here. Low response score is really good. And look at how much higher that median household income is. And here we were at 84% white, 13% Hispanic. So this is Sherman County. They're actually in the Mountain Time Zone. I'm going to tell you, you can figure out how old I am. I graduated from high school in 1972, and I lived in the county just north of this. And I would guess that in 1972, when I graduated from high school, there was not a single black family that lived within a 5-county area. That's just a guess. And probably a minuscule number of Hispanics. That whole dynamic about across western Kansas has changed, even in the small towns. It's an amazing thing to watch. I'll give you another self-confession. So when I started this deal, when I just told you how long it'd been since I'd been out there, and I've lived in Johnson County now for 40 years. I've lived in Gardner, Kansas, and still do. And when I went out there on this job, I was thinking was using the wrong words. I was talking, how did they deal with them? Isn't that terrible? How do they deal with that migrant community? How do they deal with them? And I got squared away right away at the Liberal Rotary Club. They go, how do we deal with them? They go, them or us? They are us. If we don't have this migrant community here, we don't have this economy. We don't have these plants. We don't have dairy farms. We don't have any of this without the people who have come in and helped keep us alive. The Dodge City graduating class this year, Dodge City, Kansas, was 10% white. And they're proud of it. Why do I do? I love Kansas. It's an awesome state. Tell you what, it's awesome. Okay, Gary County. This is a weird one. Wow, why did I do that for? This is Junction City. You can see Manhattan up there. It's got its own little K-State campus, but it's hard to count. And I'm pretty sure that this area that you see right there, that's also hard to count, is Fort Riley. But look at this track down below it that's pretty hard to count, 25%. Pretty high income, almost $52,000 per household. It's a lot older. 12% black, 61% white, 19% Hispanic. What a mix. What a mix. I'm not sure how they're going to deal with that particular audience, but I just was zooming around and zoomed in on that one, and that was kind of cool. All right, quiz. Oh, I can tell you're excited now. All right, Christina is a sophomore college student from Waukene, studying at the University of Kansas and living in an off-campus apartment in Lawrence. She still votes through the mail at her parents' address in Waukene. Her boyfriend is a student at Johnson County Community College, and she occasionally stays at his apartment in Overland Park. Where does Christina count? You guys are really smart. That's exactly right. This is where she lives. This is where she's to be counted. John is going through a bad breakup with his girlfriend, Christy. He moved out of their apartment in Lawrence on Census Day, April 1st, and moved into a house with his friend Craig in Eudora. Where does John count? Lawrence or Eudora? Yep, I missed that one, by the way. I figured, if you live and you assume a new residence on April 1st, that's where you're to be counted. That's where you're to be counted. Doesn't matter how long you've lived elsewhere, April 1st is where you're to be counted. Fievel and his family, the Mauskowitzes, this is good that we're in the library, are recent immigrants from Russia and are not U.S. citizens. For a while, they lived in New York City, but recently decided they'd follow the American dream and move west to Dodge City, where they now live, and where Fievel's a student at Dodge City Community College. Where does Fievel count? Dodge City. That's right. That's where he is. Boy, I got lots of questions for you. The Hermans have lived in Wichita the last 12 years. Mrs. Herman has taken a new job in Topeka, where they have extended family, and they will be moving them with them on March 28th, 2020, I should say, until they find a home. Where will the Hermans be counted? You got it right. They should be counted with the family that they're staying with. One more. Jackson is a high school senior in Ottawa who has left his home. Jackson's dad passed away a few years ago, and his mother is unstable and abusive, so at 16, he left home to stay with a friend. Now 18, he continues to stay with friends, moving from one friend to another, spending time with different friends within the Ottawa area. Jackson gets a Social Security check via the mail at one of his friends' homes in Ottawa, whose parents agreed he could use their address. Which household will count Jackson? You're absolutely right. I predict that Jackson will fall through the cracks. That's what I predict on Jackson. Let's just say, for example, Jackson is living with a friend's house on March 15th, and they've got the form to do, and they don't do it for a while, and so he moves out, and maybe he's a couch surfer or whatever he's doing, and then he goes and stays with somebody else, and then they do their form, or then he lives with somebody that's already done their form. And so here's Jackson floating around between different places. Does this happen in college towns? That Jackson is likely to fall through the cracks. Could well happen. But the persons who are staying in that, who are the household holder, filling it out, should include Jackson in there. I'm guessing that there are apartment places or house rentals around this town where maybe there might be 5 or 6 college kids in it, and they're going to get their mail there, and they're going to get a questionnaire. And one of those residents is going to have to assume responsibility for filling out that questionnaire, and they're to count everyone living in that house. I ain't confident it's going to happen. It's not. But that's one of the things that we need to do and educate people why it's so important that that be done. So one of the things that I'm doing as a partnership specialist, as a former trained journalist who has evolved in his career, is to go around this state and encourage people and communities to step up and be the trusted voices in their community. If I came in and say, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, fine. But if a trusted voice, if an elected official, a minister, a football coach, a teacher, steps up and has engaged in this process and understand it, and they work collectively together, they will help get that message out into the community. So I'm working across the state to form complete count committees. The governor of Kansas jump-started this entire program back in April by starting a state complete count committee. It's the first time the state's ever had one, and we're one of the last ones to get aboard this type of process. And so is brought to the table. You'll be surprised Kansas has allocated absolutely no budget dollars to the census, even though there's so much at stake. Kansas has allocated no money. Governor Kelly's got around it a little bit by bringing to the Complete Count Committee her various departments, her cabinet heads, KDOT, KDHE, Ag, Commerce, and that. So the respective communications departments, journalism people again, with their budgets, their websites, their social media outreach, they're going to be using them to promote the census. So basically, we know that it worked well in 2010. Field studies show that the communities that have complete count committees have a more accurate count. When the community itself advocates for a complete count, it works better. So that's really what my job is. So I've been visiting from Johnson County, and I've done some work there. And by default, I'm the closest partnership specialist right now to Lawrence, so you get me. But my territory is the southern half of this state. So I've been from Pittsburgh to Parsons to Coffeyville and Newt and Iola and Ark City and then Wichita and then Pratt and Great Bend and Garden, Liberal, and Dodge. I was in Syracuse, Kansas, population 1,400. They're in the Mountain Time Zone. They've got a big Hispanic community. Hamilton County. Did you know that Hamilton County has 9 dairy operations ranging from 5,000 to 15,000 head of cattle? And they require a large workforce that lives out in that community, and they come in and work there? I didn't either. But they're trying to figure out how they're going to count them. And then we'll add another. I keep throwing this stuff at you. And then adding to this, the dynamic of concern about government, it's at a variety of levels. There's a lot of operations out there that support those feedlots and those packing plants and those dairy operations. And there might be a mailbox at a farmstead, and that farmer has a welding business or a rendering business or a hay hauling business or an irrigation business or whatever. And back behind the Quonset hut, there might be some more residents. There's a trailers back there where they might have some migrants or whoever he's got working for them. He's concerned about their security too. He's concerned about some issues that are out there right now. And it's not like he doesn't want them there, but so that's two different levels of dealing with that government distrust that we're trying to overcome. This is who's typically on a complete count committee: relevant government personnel, educators. Schools are very important in this whole process. And God, we got great partners in the schools, religious and faith leaders, local library, not-for-profits, business leaders. We work with a lot of chamber of commerce and a lot of chambers of commerce and a lot of economic development groups. Wanted to just demonstrate how closely we're working with the schools. We're real excited about this group of people right here. At the last presidential in 2016 in Kansas, these groups came together and they did a Get an A+ in voting, and they had a great outreach program that sent out information to all the schools and teachers and encouraged kids to get their parents to vote. We're doing the same thing with the census, and that's just coming together. Kansas. There's a statistics in schools program, curriculum program that's we're pushing on schools, and we've got a lot of good teacher ambassadors that are picking up on this. Mentioned that we're working with the Kansas Library Association. And this is just a small sampling of the type of groups that we're working with, entities that are help us, that are involved with complete count committees and actually taking their own initiatives. That UFCW is a union in southwest Kansas. They've got 10,000 workers in southwest Kansas and northwest Oklahoma, 10,000, and 95% of them are Hispanic. They've started their own complete count committee. They called us. They get it. They get it. So we've got a bilingual specialist that works with us, has the same role that I do, and he's been out there working, so we are really happy to have them on board with us. There's all kinds of tools that we're promoting. Census.gov is a really robust website. They've got flyers and pamphlets and bookmarks and any kind of information on any topic associated with the census. The Census Bureau is cheap. We give you a PDF and you got to print it out yourself. That's what we tell all these towns. But that information is all out there and it's available to you too. This is really important. Today is a kickoff of a recruiting week. And not only does the census hire a lot of people, but we also, and the biggest part of that $16 billion that I talked about is the people who work for the census, me included. I make tons of money. It's unbelievable. But we need to hire census workers. We have to have census workers. And without them, this doesn't happen. So not only is it important because of the work that they do, but we also are trying to hire people at the local level. So it's people who know their own communities who are doing it, and that helps in the response rate as well. These jobs, students, you are prime targets for these jobs. They pay, and I think in this area, probably $17 an hour. They're flexible hours. You can work 8 to 40 hours a week. You apply now, and they'll start calling you in February or January or February. They're flexible. You get 58 cents a mile. You get paid every week. You're paid for your training. It's a good way to pick up some bucks during the summer months. So when we've been on college campuses, we leave a lot of www or 2020census.gov / information around, and there's some of it back there. So it's not a bad gig for the summer. Plus, you're doing good work for your community. How about that, you social-minded folks? Yeah, it's all good. Get a job that counts. Work flexible hours. You have to pass a background check. That could be a problem here for you all in Lawrence. You have to pass a background check. You have to be able to spell census. All kinds of issues. So we're trying to remind people that the census, it's safe, easy, and important. It's part of your civic duty. Be alert to scams. Some of this stuff is happening already, during that address canvassing prospect, there's been some arrests made, and people have fought. It's sad. It's a sad state, but we're not going to ask anybody for a social security number. We're not going to ask anybody for a bank account number. If someone comes to your door, they will have a badge. They will have a census, a really attractive, that's another reason you wanted this job. 2020 census satchel. Yeah, nice. But census takers will need to have that because they need to be identified. And if someone, a resident, is concerned that they aren't for real, there's a number that they can call, and they don't have to. And then that census taker can come back when required. Um, um, just know that there's other census activity going on that sometimes gets lost in this whole thing. Census used to do a short form and a long form. Probably older people in this room know that you used to, one every 10 households or so would get the longer form, and it takes a lot more, goes into a lot more detail. Well, that's called American Community Surveys, and it's part of the Census Bureau's processes as well, and that's not stopping. And when this whole thing is going on now, it'll go on through the decennial census. It works the same way as a regular census. You get an invite to take part in the mail. If you don't take part, a census taker is going to eventually come to your door. It's kind of confusing. I wish they'd just take a hiatus. They won't. I got a call from a Garden City, our Finney County commissioner was upset. I got this form and there's a citizenship question on there. You told me the citizenship question wasn't going to be on the census. Well, it's on the long form. It's on the long form. It's like, just go away for a little bit. Give it a break, but they don't. There will be some quality control. So when this is all done, someone could potentially come back and make sure that you did fill it out, or your contact, or the information that you provided was accurate, not because they're mad at you. They just want to make sure, determine how accurate the census is. So here's some key links. And the star of one of the shows right here is in this room. The census.gov website is really a robust, full website. The Kansas League of Municipalities has a great site. Kansas Count, the League of Municipalities, received a $500,000 grant from the Kansas Health Foundation to help communities promote the census in their communities. It's very important. Zan Wadel for the Kansas State Data Center. It says KU, but I like that it says Kansas State Data Center. Zan's sitting right back here, and Zan is the census lady for this state. She knows all kinds of information, and she has got a kick-ass website because she puts everything out there. She addresses issues head on. She's got good information that our cities can take down flyers and take her logo off. Zan lets them put their logos back on, and they're doing that. So what she's doing on behalf of the state and the census is big. Zan's called out. Just got back from Western Kansas. She's going to be at the state's Complete Count Committee. And dang, she's not KU. Mid-America Regional Council. That's economic development. It's more than that. It's a regional entity that does a lot of good things, and they've hired three people permanent on staff right now to deal with the census only. And they also have really good materials that allow to be customized. So we tell everybody we're here to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place, that it's safe, easy, important. And that's me. And if you want any contact information, call me anytime. Melinda Stanley handles our education outreach. I mentioned Carlos. He's our Hispanic outreach person, bilingual, good man. And Emily Kelly, I put her on there because she's my supervisor. That's the only reason. No, Emily's really good. She's from Neodesha, Kansas, and she's a military family. Her husband's a West Point grad, and they live in Manhattan, and he's in Fort Riley right now. So I rambled, and I got emotional in the middle of that. That's the first time that's happened. I don't know what came over me, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I've been told if I get a question to repeat it so it goes into the microphone, but if anybody has any questions. Sir? Okay, I'm going to do my government dance, but I will give you an accurate answer. So I'm with the Census Bureau, and I am told to tell you this, that every question is on there for a reason, and you're to answer every question to the best of your ability. And you'll say, well, you didn't answer my question. I'm going to say, well, those questions are all there for a reason, and you need to answer every question to the best of your ability. But the truth of the matter is that some of those forms are going to come back incomplete, and they're still going to be accepted. So the more that you fill it out, the better. And the less likely it is that a census taker is going to look at an incomplete form and come back and knocking on your door to try to get more information. Well, I can tell you that you know how you fill out some forms, like a credit card application, and if a field's not fill in, it won't allow you to submit it? That doesn't happen on this questionnaire. Yes. That goes back to that the quality control aspect afterwards. When the census is over, I'm not a data guy. I'm not going to try to pretend that I'm going to give you the high-tech answer on this, but they do have data control people that will literally go back into the field, and they will do pretty extensive surveys. They will do phone surveys. They will go around knocking on doors, just as I did before. So when the census is over, there will still be people with the Census Bureau that's going to go around. And they know enough to know that out of X number of responses, if X of them are right and X of them are wrong, what the accuracy is. They tell me that in Kansas, our count last time was 99% accurate. Yeah. Yep. And you believe me that I make a lot of money too, right? Yeah, sure. Yes. Fear in government, it's a question. Yeah, yeah, I think that's yeah. Basically, the census form asks ethnicity questions. It asks what your race is. If you're Hispanic, it'll ask you even to break it down even further. So those are questions that are on the questionnaire. Those very questions cause distrust in this whole process because of those questions being on there. That's the question, and my response is from a personal level to say, yeah, I think that that's part of the deal. But those numbers do help in a lot of ways. They help in a lot of ways in how when the money is distributed. Um, Certain areas are of low income, and what's the population in those low incomes areas? Certain areas have different languages, or certain areas have different races. So it helps to know, to break it down for the distribution of that money. Your information this is about to the confidentiality. That information is not released. That information is not released. But even though it's on there, because of the issues we talked about in distrust, I think that's a very legitimate question. Um, yeah, yes. The question is homeless, and how do we count them? How do we count them? I hate using the word them, but there is a process for that, and it goes back to the group quarters. So what will happen is that the group quarters operation people will come into a community and they will touch base with certain key points, perhaps the police department, food shelters, uh, and pantries. So Salvation Army type of organizations, churches, and all that type of stuff, and they will get an idea of where the homeless tend to congregate. All right. So then, once they have those identified, I, I I've heard this. This is not funny. This is just an interesting thing to me. And we were in Pittsburgh and we were talking about the homeless population. They go, well, go to the library at X o'clock on every afternoon. They'll be in there. Those people will be in there charging their phones. You know. So what will happen is that homeless count. By the way, I'm kind of intimidated to have Zan back behind me there because she knows all this stuff. But they will come into a community knowing that information, and over a course of 1 or 2 days, they will go and interview the homeless people in those areas that they're congregating to do the best they can to get as many counted as they can. That's how that will work. Yes. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. They're here. They're here in the United States. They're living here, and they get counted. If someone's over here on a 2-week vacation and they're headed back, they will not. They are not to be counted here. But if they're a student, you bet. Yes. Huh. Wow. They probably won't. They probably pass them by like a ship in the night. You have been counted, dorm resident. I would guess. That's the question is if someone lives in a dorm or a residence hall or whatever, and they've been counted by the administrative records process, will they know? Will they individually know? And perhaps that information is shared amongst the various living quarters, whatever. I don't know. Living quarters, group living quarters, dorms one thing, but Parsons has a state mental hospital. And in part of that, in association with that mental hospital, there are people who go and are treated at that hospital that don't stay in the hospital but are living with other people in the community. And so we need to work with the people in that community to know that when they're staying there, even though they're getting treated in the hospital and that's their primary place of residence, they're to be counted there. So I don't have a definitive answer, but I think that they could, whether or not they will actually know whether you've been counted. Living in a group quarter? Good question. I don't have an answer. Yes. Well, what's being done is what we're doing right now, and that's what my job is. So it's almost like a campaign. We're working hard to get this information out. This count's only going to last over a few months, so we've only got one chance to get it right. So those couch surfers, if they're living in a household where they're at, we hope that household at some point gets the message that they need to be counted in there. So this outreach, these campaigns, these local initiatives are part of how that's going to happen. So there is a complete count committee in Lawrence County, Lawrence and Douglas County, and hopefully when that committee is getting together to determine what their message is going to be, that's one of the things that I've identified to make sure, and I would think that in a college town like this, how are we going to make sure we count them? Well, we're going to have to get some information out on some flyers. We need to do a social media campaign. We need to invest in this. We need to see if we can get the university to put this out on their website or different type of flyers. So it's all an information campaign. That's the only thing that's really the only resource that we have. Yes. Well, did I say when I love the states, did I say anything about the politicians? Uh, um, you know, we've had some contention in the state legislature for a while, and this is outside my realm, so this is kind of a personal comment. We had there was attempts to draw lines that maybe someone didn't think that they should be in that district or this district, and somebody filed a lawsuit to stop it, and things just kind of snowballed, and it got to the point where we have to draw the lines, and the court said, if you guys can't get your lines drawn, then we're going to do it. I don't have an answer why Kansas was that behind on that. I don't. But yeah, we're behind on some things. Yes. It would be, I'm not sure that President Trump will go through it like he did. He's very thorough going through all his notes and stuff, as I've been told. But he will be getting, it's an overview of information. It will not be down to the household level or anything like that. It'll just be that statistical data per census tract. And so that information, like I showed you up when I went through that Rome, that had information about a certain census tract, the population, the income, that kind of level, that was really that he would have access to all that, and then that goes out to the states. When it goes to the states, he's getting the bigger picture information, and when the states get it, they in turn can dive down deep into it to determine. There's some states that use this data to determine school district boundaries. Comes down to that's how deep that can get. That doesn't happen in Kansas, and I'm glad. But so he gets just general, basic statistical data, nothing that goes down into the weeds. No, that's good. The Census Bureau is not involved in. We are the counting per people. We do the counting, and we turn that number back into the government, and then we let the politicians have at it. That's who determines the redistricting. So the census has nothing to do with that. The issue that Marlene mentioned a little bit ago about the ballot issue in Kansas, that's not a Census Bureau issue. That's a state government political issue. So we don't have anything to do with that. December 31st, 2020, the end of the year. He has to have it by then. And you might think back a little bit. Remember when that the citizenship question was floating around, and there was a deadline. There was a deadline, and part of that deadline starts if you work your way back from a date, December 31st, and then we've talked about the printing that takes place. Think about all these questionnaires and invitations that are going out. They had to be printed. They have to be coded, and it's a big, lengthy process. So really, the Supreme Court you got to make a decision right away, or we're not going to be able to get the information to the president on December 31st as the Constitution requires. Yes. That's your comment. Yeah. Um, it's a little bit different, probably. Now it used to be a pad and pencil. Now you're armed with a smartphone, and when you log in to who you're going to go to see, you'll get a map, a Google Map type thing with one of those inverted water drops, and you'll go to the house. You will go to the house like you did before, but this time Big Brother knows whether you've been there or not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, morning.
Question, is it possible for
Well, I've thought about a lot of things that the president thought that what has done that I didn't know would happen. I would hope not. I would hope that he will get that and pass it on to the House of Representatives. I don't know under what circumstance that he would do that, but I guess it's possible. But I'm certain that it'll be it. No, I'm not certain. Hopefully he will advance it forward. Oh, you guys are ready to go down to Mass, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. question is, what is the Census Bureau doing to help counter or alleviate or deal with the polarization that happens once the people get the numbers? Is that fair? Well, I like to think that even though I might have had some side comments that I wish this wasn't being filmed, but um, uh, the Census Bureau is non-political. We are nonpartisan. We have to be that way. And side comments aside, we are straight and narrow. Our job is to count people. So the politicization that you're referring to is not coming from the Census Bureau. It's coming from outside dynamics. The citizenship question was not something that the Census Bureau, well, if that citizenship question had been on there, we would have proceeded exactly as we are now. We would be going and we would be talking to you about the count and talking high on the confidentiality issue of things, and that it is important for the process of democracy and for the funding. And we would stay out of the political aspect. That doesn't mean that anybody else can't come in from the side or whatever, but the Census Bureau is strictly about gathering the numbers. So what does the Census Bureau do to help alleviate the polarization and the politicalization of the census? We just plow right ahead and do what we're supposed to be and don't get involved in politics. And I can tell you that myself as a Census Bureau, that is pounded into me in a variety of ways. You know, it's that straight and narrow. We have our messaging, and that's another thing, that's another power that those complete count committees have, that they might be able to say things and talk issues and address issues, just like Zan's website can address issues and put some information out there. She can do stuff that we as a Census Bureau cannot, because we cannot be political. Nope, she really doesn't. I can see her back there. I think that was a fair question, but her shaking the head was really instantaneous. Well, you've been a fine group. You really have. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having us here. Seal King is on the, I don't know, are you president of this group right now, Seal? Co-president, and she is on the State Complete Count Committee. And you young journalists, I can't imagine. You know, when I was in school, we had newspapers, TV, and radio. We didn't have any kind of social media. I swear to God, when I went to K-State, I had a typewriter. My high school graduation present was a typewriter. And by the time I graduated, we had one computer terminal. CompuGraphic was the name of the company, a CompuGraphic word processing thing that allowed us to move paragraphs around. Didn't even have spell check yet. Didn't even have spell check. So the changing era and the dynamics of social media and how you are trained and how you're going to move forward in that is intriguing to me. And I just know that I've always found that journalism students have just such a broad-based education. They ask good questions. They're understanding. That's going to play dividends for you no matter which way you take your career. You just need to know that. Journalism is a good career, and it's just nothing like I ever thought it could possibly be, and who knows where it'll be after this. But I think you're on good career paths. I wish you'd probably get a little better understanding it if you were in Manhattan. But all right.